Great. So welcome to day number 3 of TEC Expo. I'm very happy to have you all here, and I'm looking forward to the presentations we're going to be having today. So far, it's been a great journey. We had good presentations on Tuesday and yesterday, of course, which was the in-person day, was very fun. And we have been learning a lot of interesting ways in which technology can be applied in the classroom. So I'm sure that's going to be the same thing today because we have 2 amazing presentations happening. So I'm Eduardo Revaglietti. I'm the Learning Technology Specialist here at ETS. And we're going to begin with the opening remarks by Dr. Natasha Boschkic, who is the ETS Director and MET Lecturer here at the Faculty of Education. Dr. Boschkic, welcome.
Thanks. Thank you, Eduardo. It's really my pleasure to be here today and to do this job, and this job that I really really like. So I would like to start with just with a land acknowledgement. As you know, we are so lucky and privileged to be on this land, and we acknowledge that UBC Vancouver is situated on the traditional and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish peoples. It is my pleasure to open today and to think about TEC Expo because I'm so immersed, of course, with our team in technology and the changes that are happening over the years. And I have been lucky, I guess, to be part of the Faculty of Education for over 20 years and even longer to be in this field. And when I was thinking about TEC Expo and this year's TEC Expo, I was thinking about the focus of it and the previous couple of years that we all went through and how COVID forced everyone, including us who were already working with technology a lot, to rethink what technology can and cannot do. And I think as much as I see it almost as a pendulum, right? Sometimes you have all the fascination and happy about technology, and then it goes the other way. And I think maybe we are closer to the other way at the moment because people were so saturated with being on Zoom and having to use technology. But at the same time, I think there has been, I hope, this recognition that we can do more than we maybe thought we can do. Right. So for ordinary people, for different ages and different contexts, and especially at this year's TEC Expo with a focus on equity, diversity, and inclusion, and particularly today's sessions that are going into some of the technologies that maybe our team hasn't experienced as much or hasn't worked on as much is really exciting. So looking into what else, and I think that's the part of my job and of being in this field that is exciting for me and that keeps me in this job because there is always something different, something else that we haven't discovered, and learning is always part of that big journey. So I'm really looking forward to hearing both of the presentations, and I hope everyone will enjoy. So thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dr. Boschkic. So our agenda for today, like I was mentioning, we have 2 presentations. The first one is going to be Augmentative and Alternative Communication Simulator, presented by Tammy, McEachern, Gabrielle Coombs, and Michelle Hughes. Then that's going to take us 45 minutes from 12 p.m. to 12:45 p.m. Then we're going to go into presentation number 2. That's going to be increasing the accessibility of video, which with Michael Sider from UBC Studios, and that's going to be from 12:45 to 1:30. And finally, we're going to have our virtual social event at Gather Town. We'll explain you how to get into that space once we reach that point. So yes, let's get started. Welcome to presentation number 1. Any of the presenters can take it on right now.
I think we'll be starting at 12.
Oh, yes. So, okay, so we have some time. So maybe you can take a couple of minutes to get a cup of coffee or anything. So let's take a little break and we'll take it back at 12. See you there. Good, so it's 12. We can continue now. Once again, the first presentation is going to be on augmentative and alternative communication simulation. So welcome again to our presenters, Tammy McEachern, Gabrielle Coombs, and Michelle Hughes. Welcome.
Great, thank you, Eduardo. Okay, I'm going to share my screen now.
Yep.
Let me know if everyone can see it.
Yes.
Okay, all right. So I will probably get started. This is the Augmentative and Alternative Communication, or AAC-VR simulator. I'm Gabrielle Coombs, and I am one of the learning designers at ETS. But this is obviously not just my project. I have been joined by two wonderful partners here today, Tammy and Michelle. So I will let Tammy introduce herself first, and then Michelle.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tammy McEachern Hughes, and I am a speech language pathologist. And my area of specialty has been for quite some time, augmentative and alternative communication. And yeah, super happy to be able to share even more of our vision. I'll let Michelle introduce herself.
Thank you, Tammy. I'm Michelle, and I am one of the WorkLearn students at UBC Emerging Media Lab, and I had the honor of working on this project with Gabrielle and Tammy.
Thank you, Michelle. So to get started, we'd like to give you a bit of an overview of what we'll be looking at today. We'll talk a little bit about what AAC is, the project assignment that really got us started looking at how we could develop this simulator, why we decided to go with virtual reality as a way to go about our project, and then the fantastic work that was done by the EML student team, what happened next after we submitted our proposal, and then we'll talk a little bit about what our plans are for moving forward with the project. So with that, I will hand over to Tammy, who can go through what AAC is.
Thanks, Gabby. So as you can read this fantastic definition that encompasses all the pieces I feel for about AAC. So AAC, augmentative or alternative. So just the nature of the language there. Augmentative means to simply augment, which we are all masters of. We are augmenting the way we communicate all the time, from a hello to a point to a vocalization to so many other things. And alternative is when we really don't have the ability to do that point or to actually use any vocalizations at all. So we need something to alternatively help us with our communication. And it covers, the whole gamut. And I've worked with and had the opportunity to be a party of some tremendous growth, from littles all the way to the other end of the continuum, and in many different ways. And it's an exciting way to bring opportunity for anybody to communicate and be heard and understood. And so that's really what I think AAC really tells us about. And it led me to, and I'll go to the next slide there, Gabby, led me to having this this assignment for our students. And this assignment was really to think about how you would design some kind of communication system so that you could communicate if you were indeed not able to use spoken language. And so you'd be looking at things such as even just being able to predict what needed language is there. And in order to do that, you need to have to kind of think about what that would mean, what you couldn't do and what you could do. And that allowed them to design a communication board, and they had free for all. It could be from line drawings to images from downloaded, and organize it in a way to see how they could actually interact at a meal, and then reflect and see what they could have done or what strategies would be important to have if they were indeed somebody that didn't have a voice and needed to have some augmentation or an alternative way. So really the next step was, let's move it into a way where there's less of a stake in it, because it was harder for them to understand what it was like. And that's what kind of brought the thought of our project.
Yeah. So Tammy and I met earlier this year, and we were talking about the assignment and thought, wouldn't it be cool if we could do something with virtual reality? And so behind this sort of idea, aside from the novelty, the cool factor of doing something in virtual reality, is that it is super immersive, but also incredibly low stakes. So we wanted to give people the opportunity, once they built their communication board, in the assignment as it currently exists, they do it with a partner in person. By doing it in a VR space, yes, it's immersive, but also they are put into a position where they have the point of view of somebody who would be using a communication board to communicate, and without other communication means of communication available to them. So we are hoping that it would put people into a sort of slightly more empathetic position when they're thinking about how they can communicate in this particular circumstance. Obviously, the immersion's a big part, but what we really liked about the idea of putting it into VR is that they could do it again and again and again. Mm-hmm. They could do it on their own time, in their own space. And especially considering, as Tammy was saying, the piece on, they test out this board and then they reflect upon it. Wouldn't it be great if they had the opportunity to then evaluate the board, make it again, and then go back in to test it to see what had changed? So we're really sort of going into that inquiry-based pedagogies, the idea of students being able to ask those questions, test things out, reflect, evaluate, and then go back in and do it again. So VR sort of presents not only just the immersion, but also the iteration, the ability to do things multiple times in that really low stakes environment where people are able to make mistakes and then learn from their mistakes. With that, though, obviously, we understand that simulation, especially when it comes to disability, can be quite fraught. Simulation's not perfect, and it's definitely not the same as living with a disability by any means. In our research, we've seen some studies that have incredibly positive reactions to using disability simulators for encouraging empathy. Others are not as positive. Some of them say that, it is better if it's done in person, which is absolutely true. That being said, we want to put especially students who maybe are coming from the perspective of maybe getting into working with people who are complex communication users, but maybe have absolutely no experience or very little experience of communicating in these circumstances, to have a space where they could test out these communication strategies without the added sort of baggage of feeling like they might be offending someone or making someone uncomfortable, and also so that they can test out what works and doesn't work. So really, when we're thinking about this as a simulation, it's less of a disability simulator and more framing the simulation as a communication experience. We're simulating what it would be like to try to have a meal when the only means of communication you have is this communication board. How can you get your needs met? So the idea is to really have those students focusing on that rather than pretending to be somebody with a disability. So we had the idea, we thought about it, we thought VR's the way to go, and then we got in touch with the Emerging Media Lab, and we had just the most fantastic and amazing student team. I really want to highlight the work that Ray, Michelle, Olivia, Michael, Jenna, and Vita did. Tammy and I think we're both so impressed every week when we met with them, and can't sing their praises enough. We'd also like to say a big thank you to Catherine Winters, who is also part of EML, for all of the work that she did helping us out with this project. So this is what the EML student team did. The first piece that they made was a board maker site. So lots of these already exist, but the idea with the site is that we want students to be able to create, edit, and review their AAC boards, but have it able to be linked to the virtual reality space, so they can build it in one space and then log into their VR environment, and that board will be there immediately. So it's pretty cool. They have this Drupal hosted website, which I'll demonstrate a little in a moment. And the cool thing about it is that you log in and you can put in all of your own icons and make your board. So for students who are maybe learning about communication boards for the first time, this is a good space for them to play around. And then once it's there, they've saved it. They use it in the VR environment. And if it's not working, then they can go back to this board maker site, move things around, remove things, add things, and see if it works differently the next time. So I'll quickly demonstrate what this website looks like. It's pretty great. It is obviously not in its full finished format, but you can see here it's a nice sort of bare bones create a board site. So if I click on create a new board, I get taken to a space. I can create the title of my board. So this could be example AC board. I can put a description in if I want to, and then I can add content items. So it's nice that I have all of these options available to me below, but I'm going to be trying to have a meal and probably not collecting various animals. So I'm going to add a content item in that, for example, say the way that I want to communicate, maybe I want the word yes. So I could add the text and then I can choose a file. And so I'm just going to add an icon that I have prepared. And then I can add my icon and create the content item. And so now this is the beginning of my board and it's starting to take shape. And so students would then add different items to it. For example, for me, maybe I want the word want. I can choose my icon and create the item. And then if I wanted to move things around, I can just shift them, drag and drop, which is quite nice. And then once it's done, I can save it and preview what it looks like. And then if I'm not happy with it, I can go back and edit. And so what's really nice about this site is that they can go in, change things around. They can use icons which are also relevant to them. You know, meals are something that are really, really different depending on who you are, where you're coming from. Everyone eats different things. So being able to personalize those boards is a really, really cool and key piece to this. And then also you can save more than one board. You can have many and then use those in your VR environment and compare and contrast how they worked. So that is the board maker site. I'm going to pass over to Michelle now, who was one of the lead developers in the VR environment. So I will let her speak to that.
Thank you, Gabrielle. So once a person is ready to test out their board, they can hop into the virtual environment. And the goal of this virtual environment is to simulate a conversation with AAC boards in a place where they have a little bit more context in a classroom, and this will hopefully increase immersion. For our environment, we ended up using a Unity desktop build, and although the project initially proposed using VR, one of the things that we found was students don't typically have access to VR headsets, so there's an issue of accessibility. So our initial iteration would use desktop, so it'll be like the minimal viable product. And in future implementations, we are hoping to have VR as the next step. Some of the primary features of the virtual environment include the projection of the AAC board within the environment and have both users be able to see what the other person is pointing at. There's also the primary user interface, so tutorials, menu, and quitting the application. And there are also environmental interactions, sort of like a game experience, so people can move around inside the environment and drag objects and interact with it overall. And the last feature is the video call, which is the primary method of communication with one of the partners who will be speaking vocally, while the other person will have the option of keeping their mic off. And if you can click the next slide. So here is an overview of what the virtual environment looks like. So in the very middle corner where there's like the AAC demo page is where what you will see when you initially go into the application. With the video call, there's a username and a password, which the instructor will provide to you. And once both of the partners are ready, they can just simply join in. And on the very left, there is the virtual environment, a top-down view, and two avatars with cubes on their head, which looks kind of funny. But if you go on the very right, you can see how the video call is being integrated within. And on the very top, you can see that the AAC board is kind of zoomed in, and that's intentional. So it's easier for both parties to see what the other person has selected. Once they are done interacting with it, they can just simply leave, or if they want to learn how to interact with the environment, they can press start tutorial. And as nice as this looks initially, there are some things that we are planning on expanding on. So one of the things was user statistics. So this would be where the user is able to track how much time they spent in an environment and what options they have ended up clicking and how many times. And this can be kind of like a quantitative evaluation of the effectiveness of their board essentially. And once we are done that, we are hoping to have full integration of the virtual and the website to have a cohesive product for the term use. And I will let Gabrielle talk about the next steps.
Great, thank you, Michelle. So our next steps will involve obviously building the working product for use in the next offering of the course. We're really hoping to get some student feedback because that is, as something that they're going to have to use. We want to really make sure that it's going to work for them and is also going to ensure that they meet those learning outcomes that they need to. We're also pursuing TLEF funding. So we're having all of our fingers crossed, I think, that we get it. But the project has just been, aside from, a really incredibly interesting endeavor, just an absolute joy to do. I know I personally have enjoyed working with EML so much, and the WorkLearn students have been fantastic. So if anyone is ever interested in pursuing a project, I would highly recommend getting in touch with EML. It's been great. Tammy, do you have any final pieces that you want to share before we move to questions?
I just, yes, just to reiterate, and I'm getting stuck on words. See, that's when I need some visuals, which actually I happen to have behind me just to sort of, plant the seed on what we're working with. I think that the exciting piece is how this morphs the dynamics of the course and makes it a little bit particular to this particular assignment, allows the students to actually have a better opportunity to create and think and reflect. And like you said, to continue to grow, as this is an initial assignment in the program. And what I see this as broader, and which is why we're looking at other avenues of moving forward with this with the TLEF funding, is that there is so much room to grow this within that learning environment in my own profession, as well as broader in school-based systems, all over. So I'm eager to try it in this way because it's as a little lower stakes, but it's an exciting way of getting introduced to it. And hey, AAC is that it does go from low tech to high tech. So I mean, we're running in that range. So using some technology is something that anybody who uses AAC generally has to become an expert at themselves. So yeah, it's just, we're open to questions. If anything pops in, be happy to go there.
Yeah, great. So yes, this is, I think, the part where I'll stop sharing my screen, and if anyone has any questions or comments, please feel free to ask myself, Tammy, or Michelle.
Well, I'd like to say that thank you for the presentation. It's been really interesting, and I actually got to experience it in person. I tried it and I thought it was fantastic, both the website version and also the VR version. And I think like those elements really add engagement, and people can feel more empathy as they connect through that. So that was fantastic. And I guess well, as we wait for questions from the audience, I have one question, which is how would it be expanded if the fund is if you get the fund? What ideas do you have for that?
For expanding, yeah. I mean, I can talk, and Tammy, I'm sure can as well, but one of the really cool things about the subject or the course that we sort of envisioned this in for originally is this sort of interdisciplinary place. They have students coming from lots of different disciplines. So people who are part of kinesiology, people who are OTs, people who are doing speech language pathology, people in nursing and medicine, as well as in education. So
And in
just
law.
because we have this, yeah,
As
yeah.
well. Yeah, I had lawyers and commercial. Yeah, quite a few.
Yeah. So it's almost like a little microcosm of the university in a way, which is really cool. So because of that, you know, for me, I think, wow, this would be so useful for like medical students if they were learning about, you know, bedside manner and how to communicate with people who maybe are complex communication users. Tammy, do you have any other ideas of how it could be applied?
Oh, and simply training too. I mean, building fantastic communication partners is my goal in that class, in any event, and with actually everybody I work with, every team I work with. I'm working with someone who has some needs and some direction on where they need to go with their communication, but my team is everyone in their environment and building their capacity. So trying to make that even broader and thinking of what VR can really bring to some of those situations. I mean, I have all kinds of opportunities to, you know, shadowing and such like that I present in a school-based setting, but to be able to start teasing this out, and like I said, it's an easier to do. You're not feeling so afraid. Being a communication partner for somebody who's with someone who's non-vocal, most people are like this. we go down to something simple. We don't even want to test it, and I think this allows us to really test it and have an expectation that that individual that may be an AAC user has a lot to say. So that's what I'm hoping to grow with that. And Natasha, I see you have your hand up too.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for this wonderful presentation and for all the ideas, right? It just starts like going on. And we also had yesterday at the in-person TEC Expo event, we had a couple who was working with AAC devices and things because their kid has those needs. But despite of the technology and my excitement about the virtual environment, I actually have a question about your assignment itself. So just when you put this and you said that's one of the initial assignments that students do, what are the surprises or what are the aha moments that you see with your students? Because I think these are the areas where we don't normally go, right?
That's right.
You have general courses about this and general courses about that, but when it goes into those specific areas, I don't think a lot of people are exposed unless they need to, right?
Thank you for that question. What I find is really exciting, what I do as a result of this is, and it's really for the opportunity. It's for the opportunity for them to explore. So it's an assignment that is, you know, they do well because I'm really not, they can't make a mistake on it if they really do the work, right? And the work is simply create this board. But for creating a board, they have to be thinking of, what image? Where should I put? What might I need there? So just even thinking what language I can fit, and I only give them 32 spots. So I also say, guess what? You can only say 32, you know, you can combine them in any whatever way, but that's where it's at. And they could also make them a little bit bigger. So like more message based. So what's interesting is after they're asked to sort of, the takeaway that I love is when they reflected on what the communication partner had to do, the extra steps they had to do, that they had to observe more closely. They had to anticipate a little bit to have something ready, and be reading more that room than they normally would. Because if you're normally just expecting somebody to just point to, I want more, you know, I could be telling you I want more just by looking at something. It's really to expand that conversation. And so some of them found that how it made them feel, and that was a side note. And it's really when they had family that talked a lot and really tried a lot in the beginning, if it was family that helped, that by the end, it was sort of like they kind of had their own conversation, and the non-vocal individual with the communication board was going, nodding a lot and not part of. So keeping that, having that connectivity to grow with that and have an expectation that someone always has a voice. You just need to set the stage a bit. And that's really why I do that one. So the ahas on there are just like, wow, I didn't believe how I would feel. I didn't believe how tiring it would be to simply, you know, be finding the language at the time that I'm trying to do a task. And it challenges us to think about how easy it is for us to just say what we want. And we're literate, and are as articulate as we are. It doesn't matter that it's the literacy piece that you're really giving a chance to show to. It allows someone who uses AAC to demonstrate to you that, guess what? I just don't need to say more. I can say, I want more. It's really good. We can build the language so the level is more obvious. So many things, Natasha. I'll have coffee and tell you so many.
Is the audio or the messages are in text or in audio format or both?
That's right. So during this assignment, it is a low-tech board. So the way in which they could do it, if they determined that they were going to be able to point, they were able to access and point to a board, they would just point to their messages and show the communication partners. If they didn't want to be able to do that, some of them chose to be like this fellow right beside me, that they didn't have access to touch. So they were just looking. They had to actually build the skill set of being a communication partner, like with partner assisted scanning, we're saying, is it in this row? And building some strategies. So some of them intuitively learned that or tried it. It was low tech, and in other cases the communication partners were the ones that would say it. And so even knowing that you can be invested in this, I just don't point to it and you automatically go, oh, you want more? You just say, I want more. Oh, you want more. So you speak sort of with them, but also could reflect and confirm. So it gives a chance to really not just move on something and anticipate and do what you think, but to sort of describe it, state what you're thinking it means, because that's the thing that's lost. Sometimes we just jump and because we think that's what it is, and then confirming. So is that right? And getting a yes or no, and even building how fluid that yes and no can look like.
Thanks.
You're welcome. I talk a lot. I like communication. Sorry.
That makes sense. Yeah. I was also going to mention of the presentation we had in the in-person event yesterday, but that one had audio, so it was a little bit different, but also for people who had trouble communicating. So I was wondering if maybe when, as this gets expanded, maybe would that be something you would be interested in exploring?
So adding that audio component to it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, all of the communication systems that they get a chance to see later, they do get a chance to see that in through the time in our course, because yes, having voice output is the next level of communication, and a low tech level of like a communication board. Both of these examples here have somebody using it as an eye gaze, and the other is looking at a device and could touch. But on the table here beside me, there's like a low tech board or a flip board. So there's a range, and we don't just use one type. So where it might be really appropriate to have a communication partner to anticipate and ask, so is that right? And wait for you to indicate eyes up for yes and no. There's another time when it's really valuable for saying, yes, you're exactly correct, with their eye, with either switch access, touching directly, or using, an alternate way, a head mouse or eye gaze to select a message and speak it. So yeah, that's definitely a place to grow for sure. But this is how I start them, so they get a chance to see what does the map look like. How tricky is it?
Yeah. I can see it's a very exploratory process, just like trying out things and see what works best for the people who are going to be using it eventually.
Yeah, exactly.
Fantastic. Any more questions?
I do have more questions, but unless someone else has a question, I don't want to name. So just so you know that I do have a question.
Okay. Let's see if anyone would like to ask another question. Okay, I think you can go ahead.
Okay, so this question is for every single person in the team. So from your own perspective as a learning designer, as a developer, as an instructor, so how do you think that this virtual environment will enhance what you had before? Like, what is different when they are interacting in the virtual environment versus doing it in the way you did already, or when you're designing for something like that? Or again, Michelle, for you, like what are the considerations when you are designing that virtual environment? What is important to have?
Yeah.
I think it's
I mean,
important. Oh, sorry.
yeah, go Michelle. I think you let's start development.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we had to keep in mind was what we initially thought, and then just going through constant iterations. Because initially, when we designed this, we thought, okay, do we actually need this, or what is this trying to accomplish? We had to see what the purpose was in the things that we implemented. So for the kitchen environment, yeah, interacting with objects is a cool feature, but what does it accomplish? And then we determined that it would be accomplishing increased immersion, and that's why we kept the feature. Some other features were kind of left out with a menu system. We found that there weren't very many things to do in an environment, and that a tutorial was more effective. So we ended up scrapping the menu and using a tutorial instead, essentially. And we were hoping to streamline the process because of that, so that users are able to use the application more effectively. I don't know the answer to the question.
Yeah, thank you.
I think so. I think from my perspective, when we were talking about it initially, one of the issues that, I mean, not that, I mean, issue maybe isn't quite the right word, but one of the things that I think Tammy had noticed was that because they were doing this in person with a friend. And so one thing that we really wanted as part of the VR environment that is sort of part of this is potentially having your communication partner be a particular person. Are they a familiar person? Are they somebody who is unfamiliar? How are they going to react to you as well? Those were some pieces that we were thinking, you know, wouldn't it be great if, you know, as somebody who, you know, who uses AAC would have experienced, not everyone is going to be an amazing communication partner. Not everyone is going to be confident, and not everyone is going to know how to react to you. And so by having this platform where we can have the ability to sort of tweak those things, allow a scenario for, you know, in a kitchen that's comfortable, or in a place where it's maybe less comfortable, or with somebody who you're less comfortable with, adding that piece so that they get that experience of, it's not just a one size fits all board, you know, there's the situation, there's who you're communicating with, there's how confident that partner is. And I think too, what the VR space does is, because if you're doing it in person, you don't really necessarily have a lot of time to go back, reflect, and then try it again. This way, they have a really, really easy way of going, okay, that didn't work. I'm going to go back to my board maker now. I'm going to take 5 minutes, move a few things around, and I'm going to jump right back in. So it gives that sort of in the moment learning opportunity as well, where they get the time to reflect, but it's flexible enough that they can tweak things and then try them again, rather than, you know, having a piece of paper that they've spent time gluing things to or editing in a Word document that they then have to print and then bring to an in-person space and use it that way. They can really quickly digitally change it and try it again. And so that way we potentially have the opportunity for more iterations, more reflection and evaluation, which I think is a great outcome. Tammy, what do you?
Yeah. And I mean, the only opportunity they really had was, like you said, they had their one-off that they're doing and they're submitting and they are reflecting, they're thinking about what they're sharing out and what they felt from their experience. What I did is, after, like, with all their permission, I said, I'm going to just circulate everybody's board, so you get to see the diversity and the variety of symbol choices, organization, language people thought were important, just a visual. And so I actually did, I shared it with Gabby, a PowerPoint. I got their permission, I do have their names on it, and they were cool with that. It was in the class. I got permission, I know that part, but shared it with them so they could get a chance to sort of see, wow, I never thought of using color like that, or I didn't think about that kind of language. So it really, but that was their only chance of really sort of reviewing it, like as a group even. So it really gives a lot of learning opportunity just as an individual, let alone their experiences. They could then, I just see the sharing out just so exponentially growing, because there's just so many more opportunities and tweakings that they experienced in creating their board and the perceived outcome of the language exchange. There's still room to sort of massage, how does that communication partner feel? Because yes, if it's virtual reality, it's very different. but it's another option, right? And I'm sure they're going to take their boards and use it with their family and such too, and bring even that breadth of it. So I'm just sort of saying, yeah, we'll give you this thing, but guess what? You're going to grow so much faster with it, and it sets the course up for all the rest of the tools they get exposed to and the strategies and opportunities.
Thanks again.
You're welcome. Yeah,
That's
I'm a little
wonderful.
excited about it.
Just a little.
Tap me down, tap me down.
I might have misunderstood the question. I didn't really answer it at all. I think, yeah, is it okay if I expand on it?
Yeah, of course.
So, on the point when I was mentioning, discussing the purpose of the features. So one of the things that I think the virtual environment will do a really good job of is keeping track of things that would otherwise be awkward when done in person. So imagine that you are trying to see how many times you use the word want versus how many times you use the word of a physical objects. If you try to do it in person, it will kind of be like, oh yeah, I used water one time, tally mark, and that can sort of break you out of the immersion. But with a virtual environment, assuming that the statistics tracker will keep track of how many times you count it, you can just continue your conversation like normal and focus more on not how many times you use something, but, oh, how can I use this to communicate effectively? So in a sense, it kind of helps the person focus on what's important rather than trying to hyper focus on, did I do the assignment well, if you understood what I mean. Another thing that we wanted to implement but didn't quite have the time to do was, oh, how can we implement an AI to do it? Because we were kind of discussing, oh, should we do a video call or should we have like an AI do a response? And if we were to do an AI kind of response, what kinds of things will we be going for? And you would probably be expected to get the tailored experience of a partner that's not good versus a really good partner, and be able to feel the range of emotions that someone who has difficulty speaking with other people might be feeling, versus someone who knows what they're doing, essentially. But that's kind of like really complicated implementation. So for the video, there's also the benefit of communicating with the partner face-to-face, whereas with the AI, you can do it in your own time. So there's just like a lot of options that are available when done virtually, whereas with in person, there's only so much you can do.
Totally. I want to,
that's
hit
a
the
good
nail on the
point.
head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's behind the scene, right? That we don't know, and that's important. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think as well, like having those data points that Michelle was talking about, like how many times I use this button, you're right. It does totally take you out of the immersive experience if you're trying to track things. And by having, a digital space where that's all done automatically, that enriches that reflection. When they come to that point, they can go, okay, well, I put bread on my board because I ate bread, but I actually didn't use it at all. And now that I think about it, it doesn't really make sense in the context of the rest of my board. So I'll change it for something else because I didn't use it at all, but I used all these other buttons a bunch of times. So yeah, having that data to back up or to sort of add to their reflecting and evaluation is really cool.
Yeah, thanks. That's right. Perfect, Michelle. And thank you, Gabby, because one of the things they are asked is to indicate whether they used a word or message or not. But it's just, they just had to think of, did I use it? And they checked off. And it was a reflection to say, think about what content was really important for that experience that you were in, but they didn't get a chance. And what this opportunity allows them is to see how frequently they're using something. So a higher frequency hit would be something that would be maybe positioned in a more valuable spot on a communication board that's more accessible and readily, used. So whether you pivot from a bottom or top, and there's all kinds of great layouts that support that. But seeing what the word frequency of use or the combination of messages is fantastic data for them to start growing with. And it's what as in my profession we're doing all the time. I need to have the biggest bang for my buck on this real estate for this individual, and so you got to see what really is used a lot, and they'd be ready to be sharing that and being prepared to have that language available or modeling even what it looks like. Even if it wasn't a communication board, they could say, oh, you want something, and just setting up, it sets up so many connections for the communication partner.
That's super interesting, the data element.
Mm-hmm.
Really refine how things are done.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, any more questions? No? Well, in that case, I think we're good. So thank you so much for this presentation. It was really interesting. I think you have developed an amazing tool, and it has a great purpose, and it's going to help a lot of people. And I hope it keeps expanding and growing and blessing all the people who will engage with it. So thank you so much again, Gabrielle, Tammy, and Michelle. It was great to hear these ideas and these experiences. And I look forward to see how it's going to evolve in the next couple of months. So please share it with us once that happens. Great. So the next presentation is increasing the accessibility of video with Michael Sider from UBC Studios. This is scheduled at 12:45, so that's in 4 minutes. So let's take a little break. You can go get a cup of coffee, drink some water, and we'll come back in 4 minutes. See you then. Okay, so welcome back, everyone. For those who have joined us in the last couple of minutes, just to mention that this is day number 3 for TEC Expo, and we just had a very wonderful presentation on augmentative and alternative communication. And the next presentation is going to be on increasing the accessibility of video. Here with us is Michael Sider from UBC Studios, and I was very pleased, Michael, when I saw that you were going to participate in TEC Expo, because I've had the great pleasure to meet you in person and been there in the studios as well, and I know that all the work that is done there is fantastic. So welcome, and I'm looking forward to this presentation.
Thank you, and thank you, Faiza, for letting me know about the Expo and inviting us to submit a presentation. We're pleased to be able to contribute. I'm going to try screen sharing. So, yes, thank you for having me. My name is Michael Sider. I'm a producer working at UBC Studios, and this is a presentation about increasing accessibility for video. So if that's what you're looking for, you're in the right place. Before I start, I just want to acknowledge that UBC's Vancouver Point Grey campus, where I am, is situated on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Coombs, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish peoples. This is our first time doing this presentation on this topic, and we're planning to use it more widely for staff and faculty at the university. So I'll be really interested in your feedback. If anyone has any at the end, I can share my email. That would be really helpful. So just to give a sense of who I am and why I'm presenting about this, I'm one of the producers working at UBC Studios, which is the central media production unit for UBC. There's a lot of people making video in every department at UBC, obviously, but we're the one central group that has funding and staff toward producing high quality production video, and then also supporting people that are making their own video across the university. So we produce professional media production for educational, communications, and internal, and also knowledge research mobilization, all kinds of different topics, video, animation, graphics. We have an in-house graphics team. We do a lot to support people who are producing their own media, including some do-it-yourself studios at UBC Studios, which are very accessible, mostly free, and there's a great audio, basically a podcasting studio and a video room and a lightboard studio. If you're interested in any of that, you can contact us through the website, or you can contact me as well. And we also do a lot of workshops, which is why I'm here today, to support people producing their own media. We offer free media consultations, the producers here. So if you're considering a video project or you're nearly done a video project, we're available and without charge to chat with you, even if we're not going to work on the project with you, to offer what support we can. And associated with us is the Emerging Media Lab. The previous presentation was about an Emerging Media Lab project. So that's basically an R&D space for faculty and students to work together, developing educational media projects in immersive media. So it's less about deliverables and more about exploring and developing new things. As I say, please visit our website, and also you can email me if you would like to know more about UBC Studios. So today I'm going to talk about increasing accessibility in video. This topic focused really specifically on technical tools and technical aspects. Obviously, accessibility is a lot more than technical tools. There's diversity and representation, and there's pedagogical considerations. I'm not experts in these areas, so there are groups on campus that are fantastic supports in these areas. There's Equity and Inclusion Office to talk with about diversity and representation. And Center for Accessibility has a lot of information and support around general accessibility and in the classroom and elsewhere. And then Center for Teaching, Learning and Technology is also a fantastic resource. I'll add some links at the end for these groups in terms of accessing them. And I want to say thank you to some people from those groups in terms of this presentation. I spent some time with Afsana Sharif at CTLT, who's been working in the areas of accessibility and learning for many years and had some great perspectives and tips for me. And then Arthur Cremens and AC Digger at the Center for Accessibility also sat down with me about this presentation and had some great suggestions and feedback. So those are three people that are very available to contact around those issues if you need support in those ways. So yeah, but today I'll be focusing on video and technical accessibility. So, but in the framework that I'm coming from and thinking about these topics from is universal design and learning, which many of you are familiar with UDL, but just to give a quick intro, universal design comes from architecture and planning, about making spaces accessible, and has some principles and ideas that are involved in that. And then universal design and learning is for learning, for the classroom, for teaching. And sort of one way to describe it in a nutshell would be a proactive approach to learning design that allows us to recognize and accommodate a diversity of learners and to reduce barriers to learning. So these are the ideas that I'm coming from as I approach video in terms of increasing accessibility. And I'll be referring to these ideas and terms as I talk through the presentation. Oh, and just to say, if you have questions, feel free to put them into the chat. I may not catch them because I will be focused elsewhere, but I'll be happy to follow up on them at the end if there are questions in the chat while we're all together still. So one of the concepts that I'll be focusing on is about being proactive in universal design for learning. So this is really about building accessibility into your project plan instead of trying to retrofit your project with accessibility after you've finished producing it. So in a video context, one example of this is when it comes to what we call descriptive video, which is the audio narration describing visual elements in a video that for people that are visually impaired. Ordinarily, this is something that is added on after the video is complete, but a proactive approach is to work descriptive into the script and think about that while you're scripting and while you're filming, and just include it right into the original video. It's more efficient, and you end up with a better production quality where it flows better than if you're trying to jam it in afterwards. So that's an example of being proactive in universal design for learning with video. Another core concept is universal, which is that if you address the barriers to support one group, inevitably you end up supporting a lot of other groups just by default. So an example in video would be captions are usually added to videos, often with deaf or hard of hearing communities in mind. But once you add captions, it also supports people who are ESL. If the speaker has an accent that the viewer is not used to, it can help them navigate the accent. If you're viewing the video in a noisy environment, you've got the text right there. You don't need to worry about hearing everything. And it also just increases all the viewers have a better, a more in-depth understanding by having the visual text as well as the audio, whether or not they have challenges. So that's an example of the power of universal design. So as I say, I'll be focusing on tools for accessibility in video, working toward including the entire audience. This is image from, we provided support for the spring grad, virtual grad here at UBC. And this shows the sign language interpretation that we incorporated into the live video and also the captions. So just to give an example of what we've done in that way. So we'll be looking at captions, transcripts, translation, adapting for colorblind viewers, and sign language interpretation, and descriptive video. So I'll be talking about these. These are the scope of my presentation today. So starting with captions. So this is accessibility that's become a lot more accessible lately. Voice recognition technology is advanced to the point where it's really powerful and inexpensive. So it's really easy to create captions and then easy to add them to video. So it's become into the category of why wouldn't you include captions in a video? We at UBC Studios, we include them as a default, an SRT file or burnt into the video, just because it's so easy and doesn't take a lot of time for us. So we just do that as a default now. I'm going to introduce a couple of concepts about captions just to help as I talk about different tools around it. So it's just an example here of captions. So captions can either be optional, as you see in YouTube or Kaltura, where there's a switch. You can turn them on or turn them off by a toggle. Or alternatively, you can burn them in permanently to the image of the video. So there'll be times where it's important to do that, where maybe you're producing a video where you don't know where it's going to be stored or how it's going to be viewed. And if you burn the captions right into the video, you know people will always have access to them. On the other hand, the option is a great thing for if you don't need the captions, it's nice to remove them and to bring them back and forth as needed. So they each have their place. A term that this will help talk through the tools is an SRT file. So this is basically a captions file. It's as you would see with a Microsoft Word document .doc or a JPEG is .jpeg. SRT file is .srt. So you'll have the file name will refer to SRT. It's basically a plain text file. And once you've produced it, you can upload it with your video that it's associated with to YouTube or Kaltura or elsewhere. And that way you're controlling what the captions are that pop up automatically. You can produce more than one for the same video, each one for a different language. So you can have an English SRT, you can have a Spanish SRT, you can have a French SRT. And then if you upload them all to YouTube, for example, with the video file, when you click the toggle in YouTube, you see those options pop up. You can choose Spanish, English, French. So that's what an SRT file is. So ways to produce captions, different tools. So the most common and easiest and most accessible probably at the moment is that YouTube and Kaltura both auto-generate captions when you upload a video to the site. I think you might have to ask it to. It's an auto-generation. It's a free thing that just happens automatically. Usually for both, usually there's a lot of errors, but you can go in and edit the captions once they produce them. So that's easy to do. And then it saves your edited version. In Adobe Premiere, you can create captions. It's a steep learning curve to use Adobe Premiere. It's free if you're staff and students or staff and faculty at UBC, but it takes a while to get up to speed on it, much like Photoshop. So I wouldn't recommend going this route if you're not familiar with Premiere, but if you are, or if you know someone who is, it will generate captions, which again have a lot of errors, but you can edit them. But what you can do in Premiere is control the size, the position, the font, the color, which you can't do. It uses a few options in YouTube and Kaltura, but in Premiere, it's really limitless. So you have the aesthetic control in Premiere. And then what we do at UBC Studios is we use a service called rev.com, which it's a fee. It's US $1.50 per minute of video. So, but it's most accurate because part of their service includes proofreading by humans. So there's still errors, but way fewer errors. So it's much faster at our end. It takes about an hour per minute to produce the SRT because of the human proofreading, and you can edit within the Rev website. So what we do is we'll take our finished video, upload it to Rev. It produces the SRT file. We go in and edit on the Rev site, and then we download an SRT file. And then that's what we take with us when we upload our video to YouTube or wherever else we upload that file with it. So yeah, it's the reason that we do that. Again, it's quite a bit more accurate. So it saves us a lot of time in editing. It's not really cost effective if you have hours and hours and hours of video. So most of our videos tend to be 5 minutes or less. So it's inexpensive in that territory. there are, oh, the other thing I need to say about all of this is that this is what's available right now. All these services change constantly and the features within. So don't quote me on this. This will change in 6 months, but this is what's happening right now. And this is what we're doing at the moment. So some other potentials, there's a software produced by WGBH, which is, I believe they're the makers of This American Life. It's a public radio group in the United States who also deal with other media. They have a National Center for Accessible Media that's produced a software called Cadet, which is a free downloadable software, runs on your computer. So you produce the SRT file right there on your computer instead of up on a website. So there's some privacy and security benefits to that. I haven't used it, so I can't tell you how good it is or how accurate it is, but it was described to me by some of the staff at Center for Accessibility. So worth looking into, especially if privacy and security are a concern. So this is the website, but it's kind of long. So if you Google search Cadet WGBH, you find it pretty easily. And then there's also a Subtitle Horse, subtitle-horse.com, which is a free website that produces subtitles. Or captions. I haven't used this either, so can't vouch for it, but it's another option that's free to explore. Transcripts, another thing that many groups will find helpful. As with all these options, I can't tell you whether you need a transcript or not. There's a lot of ins and outs on that, but if you need one, here's some things to consider in terms of producing it. There's a sample transcript. So we use rev.com again, which also produces transcripts, which are different from SRT caption files. Again, it's proofread by humans. So they say it's guaranteed 99% accurate. I don't know how precisely true that is, but they're very accurate. And you can edit them on the site again, and it's $1.50 US per minute of video. So again, it's great for a short video, maybe not great for a long video. NVivo is a powerful database analysis software that staff and faculty can access through the UBC library. It produces very accurate transcripts. That's not technically what it's for. It's a very powerful tool that just happens to produce accurate transcripts. It's mostly for database analysis, but it's an option, and I haven't used it, but I understand that it's quite accurate and it's free for staff and faculty at UBC, so it's something to consider. Otter.ai is a private company that is a website. There's a free limited version. You can upload pre-recorded videos to their site to get a transcript. Again, I haven't used this one either, so I don't know how accurate it is. It's actually designed originally for live video transcription, but you can also upload a pre-recorded video. And otranscribe.com is free. It doesn't produce a transcript for you, but it's a platform where you can open your video, and it's a very easy note-taking process. So people use it to produce transcripts of their own, and that's just another option that's free. Translation is another area for widening your audience of your video. So I wouldn't recommend using Google Translate, but they have a very nice interface. So I'm glad I throw that image on there. We use, again, rev.com. This isn't a commercial for rev.com, I promise, but we found that we've used their service for web translation to a few different languages and found it to be really accurate for a first pass. $5 US per minute of video. And again, you can go into the website and translate, edit there, and you can also produce a caption file with the translated version. So I made a French caption file for an English video through this process. And then what we have done is we've taken that version and had it proofread by professional proofreader translators. There's a nonprofit organization called Mosaic, which is a refugee support organization in Vancouver, that part of their revenue way that they produce revenue to support their work is by offering proofreading translation. So we paid them $100 per 5-minute video, and they proofread our translations, and they turned out to be helpful in a way that I didn't expect, in that we had translated to French, and the rev.com was a very accurate Parisian version of the French. And when Mosaic took a look, they made a lot of edits about turning it into Canadian, Quebecois, French-Canadian version of French. So that was really helpful. There are likely a lot of resources at UBC for proofing languages. So maybe within your department, maybe an adjacent department, that'd be something to look into if you're needing help that way. DeepL is service that I haven't used, but again, Center for Accessibility suggested we mention. So it's free for 30 days and then a paid service after that. And as I mentioned with our experience with French, you want to pay attention to regionalism and dialect and such. So just because you have an accurate translation doesn't mean it's the one you need. So you want to have that in mind. That's where a group like Mosaic can be helpful. Opting for colorblindness. So I'll say off the top, I'm not an expert in colorblindness, but the simple version, the challenge that the main challenge that you want to be careful about is if you have any information where there's a color background and color text, a different color on top of it, you want to make sure that even though it's clear for someone that doesn't have color blindness, you want to make sure that people that are colorblind can still see the text, color on top of color. And that's about the contrast of the colors. The complexity is that it's not just about grayscale. Like you can't just do it to black and white and see if you can still see it, because color blindness, there's a lot of different kinds and they have different effects on the colors. So you can find this out in Adobe Photoshop. There's a viewer option that gives you the view of how your image looks in two different kinds of color blindness. So you just go to view, proof setup, and color blindness. It shows you the options. And then you can also look at it in grayscale in Photoshop. And Photoshop is free for staff and faculty at UBC. So that's one way to take a look. There's a lot of other free apps that I can't vouch for, but there are many online now that will show you your image as if you were different kinds of colorblind. I'll just show you what Photoshop did to, this is without any filters, some color. And then the most common type of color blindness is red-green color blindness. And there's the two common types are protanopia and deuteranopia. So I did, this is with protanopia according to Photoshop, and this is with deuteranopia according to Photoshop. So they're very different effects, as you can see. There's still color there, it just looks very different from the original color. So it's not a simple matter of grayscale. And then I did a grayscale just to show where you can easily see the differences in color in gray, but that doesn't necessarily help you figuring out whether someone will have challenges differentiating the colors. So, and just to emphasize that, I have, this is on the left are colors without protanopia. And then if you do have protanopia, how they look on the right. So without protanopia, the top red looks very different from the brown just below it. But if you look at with protanopia, they look very similar. And if you had text on text, you might not be able to see it. So that's an example of the complexity. It's not necessarily just grayscale. So simple solution is to just have very bright text on very dark background, and then you solved it. So, you know, that's why captions are generally white on some kind of a box of darker color, just to make it very easy. And I see Bree Weir is saying that Mac and Windows have a built-in colorblind display filters as well, that Bree has found very super helpful. So thank you, Bree, that's great. And I understand there's also a feature in Canvas that offers this as well at the moment. So it's becoming more common. But the short version is make sure it's just very bright text on very dark background, or vice versa, is the way to get around this. So sign language interpretation. This is an area that we first explored during our support of virtual grad in the spring, or a couple of years ago now. It was the first time. So we had the support of the Equity and Inclusion Office, who connected us with an external agency that provides sign language interpreters. So they came in and worked with us. And you can see in the top right, there's our box with the sign language interpreter, who was on the other side of the room from President Ono at the time, providing the interpretation and being filmed simultaneously. So the thing about sign language is that it's not a word-for-word translation. And I didn't know this until we were working with grad, but it immediately became clear that an entire sentence can become one gesture, and vice versa. One word can become a series of gestures. And then there's also a lot of mood and emotion and the scope of the gesture, a wider gesture, a more narrow gesture of the same gesture. There's a lot of nuance. So this is not something that you can just translate and try to produce without an interpreter. So it requires a trained and skilled interpreter, and they charge by the hour and they're very busy. So that's sort of your first hurdle to producing sign language interpretation. They also prefer to work in a team of two because they coach each other, help each other work around challenging words. So you're hiring two people basically to produce this ideally. Theoretically, it can be produced in a DIY way. If you are able to access an interpreter who can work with you, you can just set up 2 cameras and have the person doing the lecture or whatever, and then have the interpreter in the same room facing a different camera, record them both, and then just edit the interpreter into a small box in the corner. You can do that in Camtasia or any editing software. This is if you're able to do it live. Something else that we did live and pre-recorded for grads. So live is when you have the interpreter in the room at the same time recording. On the other hand, we had videos provided to us, which we had to add sign language to. So you can have a pre-recorded video where you play that back to the interpreter and then they respond interpreting. So then you add it on. That can be challenging because as I say, sometimes the whole sentence becomes one gesture, sometimes one word becomes many gestures. So trying to fit it on top of a pre-recorded video can be a challenge. It's best to do it live and have the speaker responding to the interpreter and giving them room to interpret. So there's some complexities there, not impossible, but I've also found out recently that the Center for Accessibility, when students require a sign language interpreter, they're able to provide that in the classroom. So that's one way that you can access an interpreter at UBC if there's a student request. That doesn't necessarily apply if you have a video that you need to add interpretation onto. So unless a student requests interpretation for a video, I suppose. But anyway, there's a gap there currently where it's about accessing the interpreter. And the final area of technical approach to providing accessibility that I was going to talk about is called descriptive video. So this is less common. It's around, but it's basically adding narration to describe visual elements in a video. So if there are things happening visually that are important to the content that the viewer needs to know about and the viewer cannot see them, then you can add an audio narration track later to have somebody describing what is not being seen. Conventionally, this is done after the video is complete. Then it's shown to a narrator who records audio that's then edited on top. This is challenging because you haven't edited the video to fit in that narration, so sometimes it just won't fit. The adding a narrator voice later means that you're changing not only the pace of the video possibly, but also the style. The voice might not fit into the other voices. It might not be appropriate for the audio that's going on. So as I was researching descriptive video, I came across another approach called integrated descriptive videos, which was I don't know if it's quite pioneered by, but it's being popularized by a group called Accessible Media Incorporated, which is a Canadian nonprofit. I'm going to give their information in the next slide, but they have taken the approach of, this is the proactive approach from the universal design and learning context, where when they're planning the video, they're thinking about descriptive elements. They're thinking about what elements are important that are only visual and need to be described. So they work it into the script, and they are working it in different ways so that it doesn't need to be added later. It's already in the original video. And this allows the continuity of voices, so you're not adding a different voice, and also just makes it a lot simpler for fitting that narration in because it's in there from the beginning. You're not trying to squeeze it in later. So I think this is a really powerful idea that I'm really excited about, because the adding descriptive video later is quite a daunting concept, but adding it in as you start is a great solution for visually impaired people. So as I was actually watched a recorded workshop with Accessible Media Incorporated, and they talked about a lot of ways that you can do this from the beginning of planning a video so that descriptive elements are already incorporated. So I thought I would just share a few of those. So on the right, we see a lower third, which is the line that you see on the bottom of the video with the name and the title. Ordinarily, we just see that text and nobody reads it out. We just assume that people are going to read it, but someone could read it out. We could have, if someone's going to interview the person, they could start by just introducing the person. We're speaking today with Dr. John Innes, Dean of the Faculty of Forestry, or the person themselves could introduce themselves while we see the text, and that way you're not relying on that text to get that information. Any kind of charts, tables, infographics that appear on the video, if somebody can describe those or explain the information in the chart in an audio way, in a way that you don't need to see it, that covers that within the original video, instead of just trying to add that in later. and any other visual action that's significant to the content. So if it's important for people to know that someone just walked across the room or somebody just picked up such object, having somebody, the person themselves could say it, I am now going to walk across, I'm now going to pick up this object or whatever. It's just incorporated into the scripting and the actual recording. So it doesn't need to be added later. And I feel like this can easily become conventional, much like captions. We put captions on everything now. We can also incorporate descriptive elements into everything that has information that needs to be incorporated. So I feel like this is an opportunity for a shift in how we produce videos, especially educational and other content like that. And so the group I was just mentioning is Accessible Media Incorporated by AMI.ca. It's a Canadian nonprofit, and they work a lot with CBC and other publicly funded groups to produce integrated descriptive video where they're working it into the original planning of the video. They also provide information about best practices and training around these issues. So that's their website, and I'll have the website at the end again, but just to say this is a great organization. So there's a couple other concepts I'll try to jump through quickly here, just to be in a timely way. Some of the ideas that are talked about in Universal Design for Learning in terms of how to increase accessibility. One is to offer a variety of formats of representation in general when you're providing learning. So with video, there's a lot of ways, opportunities this way. Video itself, there's often an alternate form of representation if you're in a classroom with text and graphics and spoken, and then including a video. So it's already by nature an alternate form of representation. Within video, there's a lot of opportunities to add different kinds of formats. So animation, static graphics, infographics, text, icons, layers of audio. These are all often a part of video, and they provide a variety of ways of taking in the information, which can be helpful for an audience. It can also mediate the sensory stimulation level to meet learning needs. So this can be a matter of if people are easily overwhelmed, you can slow it down and have it more calm. If people are easily distracted, you can ramp it up. So you can just play with that to meet your audience in the style of the edit and the visuals, pace, things like that. Another concept within Universal Design and Learning is to offer a variety of means of engagement. So this is also something that we often do with video, but just to sort of lay it out as part of UDL. Asynchronous video, as we often talk about, allows people to view at their own pace, their own volume, self-guided. They can view, step away, come back. The context that they're viewing the video in allows all these ways for people to help themselves to take the information in better, more effectively. It's also, video is great for reviewing before class, after class, preparation, reinforcement of information. Students producing video themselves is a way to encourage engagement with the content on a level that they wouldn't have ordinarily. And it also is, video is a way that we often use to increase access by having virtual field trips to locations that students wouldn't be able to access or not as easily. And also to access experts that aren't able to come to the university or there's just not the resources to bring them. You can do interviews at remote locations. So these are all ways that video can be used to offer a variety of means of engagement for the learner. And this is my favorite example of several of those ideas. This was a series that we produced with Patrick Colbert from Faculty of Forestry. It was my first project at UBC, working with Patrick. And we did a series of videos about plants in situ. Part of the course, he takes students out to the forest and shows them the plant and gives a short lecture in the forest. But taking notes in the forest is challenging, and he has a lot of ESL students. So we worked together to produce these short videos that students could watch before the field trip and after and review. And also just even if they're not even able to go out to the forest, this provided that access. So that covered a lot of those kinds of territories with video. So just to come back to the definition that I gave of universal design and learning, that hopefully I've been coming back to this, grounding the presentation in these ideas, but it's a proactive approach to learning design, allows us to recognize and accommodate the diversity of learners and reduce barriers to learning. So yeah, that's everything I have. I'm going to show a list of links here, but time we have left, I'm happy to answer questions, and also eager to hear if anyone has any other thoughts about these tools that I haven't covered or perspectives. So thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Amazing presentation. So much information that is very valuable to increase accessibility in video. So I do have a couple of comments and questions, but let's go first with the audience. So I see a hand up there, Sandra. Oh, I think, yeah.
Yeah, I think we also presented on the Seeing Eye app, and I was thinking if that could be included.
Sorry, what was the app?
Yeah, the Seeing app, and then the Envision.
Could you write them into the chat just so I can
Okay.
confirm the spelling? That'd be helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
And I'm going to stop screen sharing, but if you would like to see, I'm happy to share this PowerPoint with people. But, so seeing A. Yeah, I'm not familiar with that one. Can you tell me what that?
So basically, this is also an app that persons who are visually impaired can use to detect colors. It's able to tell the emotions of their face or tell the color of their dresses. You could also use that to detect the currency and read shorts transcripts. It has a lot
great.
of,
okay.
Yeah, a lot of features on it.
And so that's to help, it scans and then interprets the color for people that would have challenges with color, is that?
Yes.
Oh, that's great. Thank you for bringing that up. I wasn't aware of it. And this is a Microsoft app. Is it free? Do you know offhand if it's?
Yeah, this is free on iPad, but it's not available. Yeah, on Microsoft. Yeah.
Oh, okay, got it.
The Envision version, which also works directly like the Seeing Eye. This is on. It's not available. I think it's available on other devices. So.
Okay. And is this also to support people that have issues with color blindness?
Yes, please. For persons with visual impairment.
Visual impairment. Okay. Well, thank you for mentioning these.
Thank you, Sandra. Tammy, do you have something? Oh, I think you're muted. Oh, I think you're muted. Yeah.
Hello, Tim.
There we go. Yes.
Flip. Now you can hear me.
Yeah.
Pull it down. CAI is something I've used with, visually impaired kiddos, but it also even reads expression. So we've used it for communication. So it could, and if you've got a favorable light, it can age you. It'll say, male with light gray hair and a smile, age, 33, depending on the light. But it's really helpful for showing expression. So yes, it does that as well.
Wow, that sounds amazing. Thank you so much. Yeah, part of our journey right now, like we've done some of this work around the things that I presented, but we're also hoping to gather more information. So these are both very helpful. Thank you. That's great.
Thank you.
Hi, Michael. I'm Marika. Thank you for your interesting and informative presentation. So you did mention about when it's better to be have accessibility in mind during the planning phase. So as we have so many tools for the captionings and transcripts that we can do it post-production of the media. So during the planning phase, what would you be consider when you want the media to be more accessible?
Yeah, thank you. That's something I've been thinking a lot about, and we've been looking for opportunities that way. And for me, the biggest thing that I've discovered recently that I'm really wanting to focus on more is descriptive video. So including descriptions in the actual video for people that have visual impairment. So as I was saying, if there's lower thirds or any charts on the screen, just having people describe them out loud is a really great, that requires some planning ahead of time before you make the video, to leave the time in the video and have it be part of the script. So I would say that's one thing that you can really include proactively. Yeah, and then also, well, anything that you would do around color issues, contrast for colorblind would be proactive as well. You need to work that in ahead of time while you're creating the video. You don't want to try to correct that later. So those would be two prime ones, I suppose.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question, Michael. So you mentioned that there were some challenges when the sign language interpretation was added if the video was already recorded. So what were exactly these challenges and how were they overcome?
Yeah, so what we found was that because we were doing both, we were doing some situations where the interpreter was in the room with the person speaking. In those situations, we found that it was really helpful to have the person that was, we would cue the person who was speaking so that they would have, so that the interpreter would have the opportunity to catch up. So, for example, President Ono, when he finished this, we would ask him to stop and wait while we're watching the interpreter catch up. And then when the interpreter caught up, then we'd be like, okay, go, next sentence. So that's what you can do when it's live. When it's pre-recorded, you don't have that opportunity, obviously. So somebody might just keep on talking while the interpreter is getting further and further behind. So one thing that we did in that situation was, well, we had a couple of approaches. One was to just add in pauses in the video in post-production. So we were re-editing the video after the fact, which became very complicated because sometimes there was music or other elements. And so that's to be avoided. But that's one thing that you can try to do is add in some gaps to allow the interpreter to catch up. And in the end, if that's not possible and you're not doing it live, then sometimes the interpreter just needs to scramble and catch up. And we also had some clips where the clip would end and the interpreter would just keep going for several seconds. So we would just add black with the interpreter continuing to interpret after that footage had ended. So that's another possible thing. So
yeah, interesting. So like in those gaps, like do you usually put a picture or something to have there? I would imagine.
Yeah, where that's possible, or like freeze the frame or something like that, or just fade the image to black, but keep the interpreter in the corner on the black screen.
Okay, yeah.
Things like that.
Yeah, and I think like also it makes sense that in some cases, like the interpreters just have to, in some way, like simplify what they're doing. Because I was watching a video, like it was a live video of someone like a speaker, public speaker, and they had someone doing sign language kind of like on the side, but I saw like the person was like going really fast, but I guess they were just like simplifying it. Yeah,
from what I understand, that's what happens in live situations sometimes where the speaker isn't pausing for the interpreter. So yeah, it's something to be aware of. It's just easier for anyone that's relying on the sign language interpretation. It's great for them to have a nice even pace and to not have the interpreter rushing. So if it's possible, it's great to mediate that where you can.
Yeah. And, I've been very excited of the things you've been mentioning of adding narration. So I think that would be fantastic because I have a background in audio and all of that. And I was just imagining maybe like in the future someday, just as we have like the ability to, activate captions, maybe we can activate different mixes, which that would be pretty cool if that would be possible someday.
Yeah, that's something we were wondering about. There are ways to do that in H5P is interactive layering that you can add to videos at UBC now. UBC IT supports H5P where you can do things like that. You can choose between audio tracks as one potential. So that's one way to approach something like that.
Yeah, fantastic. Any more questions?
I see Bree is familiar with H5P. It's fairly new, but there's incredible potentials in there that we're pretty excited about as well. A lot of interesting things.
Yeah, it's a fantastic tool. We use it a lot also here at TTS. Okay, so let's see any final questions.
I'll put my email in the chat here if anyone has questions and also feedback that you'd like to share. Constructive or otherwise is fine because this is the first time I'm doing this presentation and we're going to be doing it again. So I'd appreciate any thoughts that anyone has. And also, if you would like the PowerPoint, feel free to send me an email and I can send you a PDF version of the PowerPoint with the links.
Yeah, that would be very useful. As I was watching the presentation, I was thinking this is something I'm definitely going to be coming back, you know, as I engage in new projects. So thank you so much, Michael. That was a very great presentation, very informative. And yeah, all the best in the projects you'll be doing in these kind of fields.
Thanks, and thanks for having me. It's great to have the opportunity.
Fantastic, thanks. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen again. Great, so we're coming to the third part of the agenda, and now we're going to have a virtual social event. So that's going to happen in GatherTown, and I'm going to ask my colleague Marika to explain us how that works and share the link so we can all meet in that place. Marika?
Hi, everyone. So I guess I can just provide the link here. So in the chat box, you can now see the link with GatherTown. So I will meet you guys there. It's actually a virtual gathering event. So if you're interested in knowing more about it, we can actually meet there. So let's move away to that link. You just need to click on the link, and then it will ask for your access to your camera and audio, so you can join us there. Yeah,
Perfect. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, thanks, everyone. We'll see you there. Bye.